Welcome to the church family that is lifting lives through living love, inspiring hope, filling with faith, and transforming our world. These recorded messages are made available so that you might have additional opportunities to stay connected with us, and then you might learn and grow in your faith. God bless you as you hear the word today. And now, the message.
My name is Susan Bennett, and I am the Director of Public Relations for the Indiana United Methodist Children's Home in Lebanon, and I've been here 20 years. The mission of the Indiana United Methodist Children's Home is to transform the lives of Indiana's troubled youth. These children have been abused and neglected. They're from very dysfunctional homes. And our mission is to transform their lives through Christian values, good education, and through the teaching family model, which we implement in all 4 of our group homes. The teaching family model has been around since the 1960s, and it is to show the children what a family is like. They eat together, they go on trips together, they learn independent living skills, and they learn the basics of what a family is. Many of our youth have never had a mother and a father or a caring adult in their lives, and so this is a major part of our treatment program is tender, loving care from adults who are also very productive members of society.
A story that sticks out in my mind as a family teacher, my wife and I were family teachers for 2.5 years. We had a young lady, she had a rough night. And so we got her to calm down. It was running late, had to go to the grocery store real quick, so she went to bed, I went to the store. And when I got back, the young lady ran out the door and she goes, "I thought you left me." I said, "Well, honey, why would you think that would be?" She said, "Because everybody's left me in my life." I said, "Not us. We're family here. You may not understand that, but what you did tonight just made us love you more." And it realized that the mission that we had here was to show the love of Christ to these kids. We may be the only chance they ever see that.
During the 100th anniversary at the Indiana United Methodist Children's Home, we had the distinct pleasure of having a reunion. And many of our residents came back and said that the Indiana United Methodist Children's Home had saved their lives, and that they found God while they were here. And that's an impact that they have every day in their lives, is the spiritual education of the children's home.
John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, and at dawn he appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. And the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "If any of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Well, this has been quite an amazing week for our church. I don't know how many of you were here Wednesday night for the Eva Core presentation. It was simply phenomenal. Those who are here, can you just get a witness? Can I get an amen of just how amazing it was? To hear that kind of personal testimony, that story of someone who's gone through so much and discovered the power of forgiveness. I want to tell you another story. It's not quite as dramatic as Eva Core's, but it is dramatic in its own way. It's a story of a rabbi named Michael Weiser. Rabbi Weiser now lives in New York and works among kind of establishing peace among different religious groups, especially his Muslim neighbors. But Rabbi Weiser began his career in Lincoln, Nebraska. And when he first moved to Lincoln as a cantor, he didn't receive a very warm reception at all. In fact, he was there just a matter of a week when he got a phone call, and an anonymous voice came through on the other line and said, "You'll be sorry you moved here, Jew boy." And then a week later, he received a package in the mail full of hate literature, racist literature, and there was a card from the Ku Klux Klan that said, "The KKK is watching you, scum." Those things were coming from a man named Larry Trapp, who was the grand dragon of that chapter of the KKK in Lincoln, Nebraska. Now that sounds imposing when you say the grand dragon, but Larry Trapp in the person, in the flesh, wasn't quite so imposing a figure. He was actually pitiful in some ways. Larry Trapp had advanced diabetes, even though he was only in his early 40s. He was nearly blind and had both legs already amputated, so he was bound in a wheelchair. He lived in a small, cramped apartment surrounded by literature, propaganda, Hitler stuff, all over his walls. He talked about much, later in life how he felt so powerless and angry that the KKK was the one place where he felt authority in his life, And so he said, "I spent lots of time and lots of money. I went out of my way to instill fear into others." Except Michael Weiser wasn't someone who was going to be easily intimidated. Once he found out who was sending these messages and who was sending this mail, he started to retaliate. He started to call Larry Trapp back. It's kind of like, don't you wish you could call the telemarketers back, He started calling him back, and he never got him, but he would leave messages on the answer machine. He called them his love notes. They weren't really all that loving. He would say things like, "Larry, there's so much love out there. Why aren't you getting any?" Or he'd say, "Larry, why do you love the Nazis so much? Don't you know they would have killed you if you lived in their regime?" Things like that. His wife, Julie, Michael's wife, would overhear him saying things like that. And she'd say, Michael, be nice. Be nice. He'd say, "Be nice to a man like that? Be nice. If you ever get him on the phone, just promise me you'll be nice." He said, "Be nice. How's that going to make any difference to a man like that?" Let me pause the story for just a moment. Have you ever felt that way about someone? That someone is hopeless? That you ever said a man like that or a woman like that? Have you ever wondered how someone like that becomes like that? I mean, what could justify that kind of hate? What could justify that kind of behavior? You see, I think when people are kind of caught in this conflict, they feel themselves under attack. Larry probably felt himself under attack, maybe not personally, but his race, his culture, his way of being, his values. And in response, when any of us feel ourselves to be under attack, what do? We fight back, we go to war, we arm up. And when we go to war, the conflict only deepens. About a year ago, I read a book called The Anatomy of Peace. It's produced by the Arbinger Institute. I love the first lines of the prelude. They say, typically, we assume that people who are in conflict want solutions. And they do, of course. Parents of belligerent children, they want the belligerence to end. Those who work for tyrannical bosses want to end the tyranny. People want solutions. But notice that the preferred solution in each case is that someone else change. Should we be surprised then when conflicts linger and problems remain? You see, they make the argument that each of us, when we go to war with someone else, rather than ending the conflict, we actually invest in it. We invite the behavior in others that we most detest. The way they describe it, they says, all of us have, our behavior, what you can observe, what someone says, what someone does, but underneath that, they say, is a way of being. And there's two ways of being. There's a heart at war and a heart at peace, and the difference between the two is simple. It's whether you see the other person on the other side of the conflict as a person or as an object. Are they a person with the same hopes, fears, desires, needs that I have? Or are they just an object, just a number, an irrelevancy, an obstacle to me getting my way? I read this book while I was in Haiti, and I wasn't expecting really for it to impact me the way it did, but when I'm in Haiti, when Jamelin's in Haiti, we experience just this overwhelming number of people who ask us for help. And you wouldn't think that that's something that creates conflict, but it's, if you go through all the day, 24 hours or 15 hours of daylight, and wherever you go, people are kind of coming and asking us, can you help us with food, with school for my daughter, with medical bills, with a home, and it gets to be overwhelming. And if you catch me in a moment when I'm just totally burned out and stressed out, and I know I have nothing to give, I can be really sharp with people. Just leave me alone. And I read this book and I realized, the behavior may be the same. I may still say to someone, I'm sorry, I can't help you, but it makes a huge difference whether I see them in that moment as a person or whether I see them as just an object, just another demand, another person to be swept aside. If I can remember to see them as a person, I may say the same words, I'm sorry, I can't help you, but it makes all the difference whether my heart is at peace to them or whether my heart is at war. You have a child that you need to discipline, it makes all the difference. You may still impose the same penalty, it makes all the difference whether you do it in peace or in war. You have something that your spouse asks you to do, and you have no desire to do it, but you do it anyway. It makes all the difference whether you're doing it in peace or begrudgingly at war. Does that make sense? So when you're at war, what do? Well, you arm yourself, not with stones and knives or anything like that. You arm yourself with justifications. Like you're right to feel the way you're right, the way you feel, and they're wrong to ask this of you or to treat you this way. And as soon as you arm yourself with justifications, the next thing you do is you begin to recruit allies to yourself. You tell your story of righteous indignation, your story of victimization, and you recruit people to take your side, to align themselves with you against them. And once you get really locked in this war, this is where we invest in the conflict. There's no room for middle ground. You can't play both sides. You're either with me or you're against me. When I read this book and I see this diagram, I think, oh, Lord, isn't that a perfect picture of what our world looks like today? I mean, just watch the news. It's all about whose side are you on? I'm amazed when I read articles on my phone. I mean, half the time they're not making reasoned arguments. They're just name-calling, right? It's as if we are incapable of recognizing that people on the other side of the issue may have the same hopes, desires. They may have positive motivations and intentions. We forget all that because it's just easier to label people as objects. And this isn't just about the news and politics. It's in all facets of life, in our homes, in our offices. We feel it, don't we? This feeling of being threatened. Like we're constantly asking people, are you with me or are you against me? I need people on my side. So how do we get out of it if that's the cycle we're stuck in? Well, let's turn to today's scripture then. Jesus is in the temples, And he's locked in a conflict because what he is saying is upsetting people around him. And so the religious leaders, they bring before Jesus a woman whom they have caught in the act of adultery. Now, the law of Moses is clear that a woman who is caught in an act, or any person caught in such an act, should be stoned immediately. But what they're doing is they're scapegoating, right? I mean, notice it's a woman, not the man who is brought before him. They're scapegoating the problem. Scapegoating is any time we externalize blame on something or someone else rather than looking internally ourselves. They're bringing this woman, saying she's the one to blame. To blame for what? Well, the people of Jesus' day, they felt themselves under attack. Not just militarily with the force of Rome, but culturally. Because what Rome desired more than anything else was to assimilate people into their values, their way of being. And so if you were a Jewish person living in the first century, you felt your traditions, your way of life, everything was under attack. And there are people who are clinging so tight to the old ways. If we just held true to the Torah, we'd be okay. We're going to come out. God will vindicate us. And so they bring this woman before Jesus. And they don't really want to know what Jesus thinks about the law. They already know what they should do to this woman. They want to know, which side are you on, Jesus? Are you with us or are you against us? And Jesus is being asked to make a choice between saving this woman or upholding the law. And Jesus doesn't buy into the conflict. Instead, he bends down and begins writing on the dust of the ground. And then he stands and he looks at them all and he says, "Let anyone who is without sin cast the first stone." I mean, that's Jesus' genius, is that he doesn't allow them to scapegoat and blame something external. He says, look inside yourselves. Are you without sin? Will killing this woman make you whole? Will it fix what's wrong in our world? Will it fix what's wrong in you? How did you even get here in this moment? And the fact that you're willing to throw a rock at someone, maybe you're just as caught up in sin as she is. So what would you perhaps need to let go of today? I want you to imagine, if you will, a rock being in your hand. Go ahead, clench your fist, and imagine a rock just sitting there in the palm. What would that rock represent for you? Would it be words that someone spoke to you a long time ago that you've never been able to get rid of? Would it be some group or some viewpoint? Whenever you hear it, it incites anger. It gets under your skin. Is it rejection? Is it hurt that some family member has inflicted upon you? What does that rock represent that if you could hurl it with all your might, you would? And then hear Jesus' voice asking you, are you without sin? And I invite you to look in, to maybe see the way that you have hurt others, intentionally or unintentionally. To see the way that maybe you've perpetuated the conflict. To see the way that this rock is really killing and poisoning your own heart. Do you feel its edge? Do you feel its sharpness? Will you open your palms and let the rock fall? So what did you let go of there? Was it just the judgment that you want to hurl at someone else? Or was it the arrow pointed at your own heart? See, Jesus challenges all of us. Will you let go of your heart at war so that you can find peace? One by one, those men dropped their rocks, until it's only Jesus and the woman left. And Jesus asks her, "Woman, does no one condemn you?" She says, "No one, sir." And he's the only one who meets the standard. He's the only one without sin that could cast the first stone. Instead, he says, well, neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. This cycle that you've been trapped in, you're free to go and live without stones. I've asked Frank to share with us a song written by David Wilcox, who also wrote the fence story that Mark shared with us at the beginning of worship. It's a story about a man who thought he always knew what he believed, and then was surprised one day when his faith came alive.
To church they asked for volunteers to make a presence in the park. It's where the wicked plan to demonstrate and carry signs to set a spark. Someone behind you heaved a stone, struck the thin man behind his ear. So now there's blood upon his sign, which read, "There's nothing here to fear." The wrath of God, somebody yelled, will punch all of those like him. But if you travel back 2,000 years, I swear you'd hear this all again. Back then they'd say, these soldiers walk on sacred ground. This land's our history and our home. They have no right to be around. They are the evil force of Rome. So just how strong this change of heart must be, the one that Jesus once described. Kindness to your enemy. Carry his pack an extra mile. And fearless love. Fearless love. Fearless love makes you cross the border. Your mind snaps back to where you stand. The church is here to fight a cause. And at your feet a fallen man who said his cradled in his arms. And though his blood contains his death, and through the lines are drawn in hate, and drop your sign, a Bible verse, and help the wounded stand up straight. Oh yes, the high religious still were scorned, just like they did all that time back. They'll say you helped the other side. They say you hauled that soldier's pack. But now how could you carry that man's sign? In your heart the choice was clear. You didn't join the other side. The battle lines just disappeared. Fearless love. Fearless love. Fearless love makes you cross the border.
So I told you I'd finish that story. Rabbi Weiser kept trying to call Larry Trapp and kept leaving his love notes until one day he finally, by surprise, caught him on the line. He was so caught off guard he wasn't sure what to say. Larry Trapp said, "Why are you hassling me?" And in his mind, he heard his wife saying, "Be nice." He said, "Well, I'm sorry. I heard you were disabled, and I thought you might need a ride to the grocery store." Larry Trapp said, "I got that covered," and he hung up. But from that point on, Rabbi Weiser's heart was no longer at war. It was at peace. And he kept calling Larry Trapp every week, except now his love notes were genuine. Until one day, Larry Trapp called him back and he said, Rabbi Weiser reflecting, he said, when he spoke the words, it gave him a chill down his spine. He said, "Rabbi, I'm caught in what I'm doing and I don't know how to get out. Will you help me?" And so Michael and his wife Julie went over to that small, cramped apartment. And that night they took down every Hitler neo-Nazi poster. They burned every ounce of the KKK literature. They spent hours talking together and a friendship formed. Larry's health continued to worsen. Within a few months, his kidneys started to fail. And at that point, the Weisers invited him to live in their home. He threatened their daughters, and instead they offered one of their bedrooms and said, "Why don't you stay with us?" Julie, in fact, left her job to become his caretaker, and she continued to care for him the remaining months of his life. He apologized over those months to everyone that he felt he had wronged, and beyond that, he converted to Judaism. Here's a picture of his gravestone. Isn't that awesome? The man who spent his life persecuting another race converted to that faith, to that religion, and was embraced as a member of it. That's what grace does. It has the power to disarm and to include, to make peace where all we see are enemies.